We ready to go here?
I believe we got everybody here, at least the directors.
I am Marshall. Can you hear my microphone?
Yep, I can. Oh, Mark's here. I didn't see Mark. That was it. All right. Well, you want to start the meeting?
Go for it, Mr. Chair. Lead us.
Well, I'm waiting for somebody to volunteer to. Okay, who's running the slides here? Do we have the agenda coming up or what's up? Thank you. Okay, so the first item is I'll call the meeting to order. And the next item is a roll call. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Director Cody,
Present.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Zimmer,
Here.
Chair Ohilsky.
Present.
Everyone's present.
Okay, so do we have any opening board member comments?
No comments from Mark.
I'm good.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no board member comments, we'll move on to item number 4, which is a special presentation by the county. So I'll turn it over to you, Daniel, and you can introduce Erin.
Yeah, today we have Erin, and I apologize for butchering your last name, Singewald.
Mr. Executive Director, I'd be happy to introduce Mr. Erlen Singewald.
There you go.
All right, I'll turn it over. Bruce, I'll let you do it then. How's that?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry to butt in here, but I appreciate it, Daniel. A pleasure to have time on this agenda today for our planning department to talk a little bit about our roles and responsibilities for land use planning and their interaction with resource development and protection. And, in particular, as we all know, we've got some very interesting public policy issues that are coming before us, starting with the state's interest in promoting more accessory dwelling units and leading on to a wider plan for the future of Los Osos. And, in the time I've been in office, one of the things that I think both confuses and in many instances frustrates the public is the issue of the division of government authority, the division of government responsibilities. And we see that a lot in the coastal zone, and in particularly in on the North Coast in the 2nd District here. That is the County of San Luis Obispo, in its unincorporated communities, it has the authority for land use regulation and planning. And in those same communities, other entities have a variety of responsibilities for the provision of municipal services like water, sewer, fire protection, and all the other things that make communities work. And in those instances where the responsibilities are divided between 2 different government entities, it's become clear to me, and I don't think this is any great revelation, that being clear about our roles and responsibilities and being on the same page in terms of especially planning for the future is a really important thing. And so as the Basin Management Committee now has some years of experience under its belt in dealing with its piece of this particular puzzle, so too the county has been working, as you well know, very hard on updating our land use regulations and envisioning a plan, particularly for the community of Los Osos. So we thought it would be really useful for Erin to outline our view of how this all works, and use that sort of as a framework for how the county can work with water purveyors and other regulatory agencies like the Coastal Commission to do the best possible job for the community of Los Osos. And so, Erilyn, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, Supervisor Gibson. Erilyn Singwald. I'm the Planning Division Manager for Long Range Planning and Housing with the County of San Luis Obispo. Also online here, we have Kylie Hensley and Corey Hahn, as well as Mladen Bandoff from the Public Works Department. So can I share my screen here to give the PowerPoint, or is the PowerPoint already queued up for me on your end? Marshall?
I don't have it, so you'll have to share it.
Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to provide this update today. As we heard Supervisor Gibson state, last year the county approved several planning initiatives related to resource management and land use planning in Los Osos. These initiatives have largely been in response to direction from the Coastal Commission, for the county to update the Los Osos community plan before vacant lots can connect to the sewer, and also in response to state policy to promote affordable housing and ADU development statewide. As I think this council knows, there's been a lot of interest and discussion in the community about these planning initiatives, and particularly about what they mean for the sustainability of the Los Osos water supply. So the purpose of this presentation is to clear up any confusion and inform the community and BMC about these initiatives and how they are intended to work together with the Basin Management Plan and purveyor authorities to ensure sustainable growth. As Supervisor Gibson mentioned, a big focus of the presentation is on the roles and responsibilities. I want to start by providing an overview of these roles and responsibilities related to groundwater resources in Los Osos for context. Ultimately, the county, water purveyors, and BMC all have distinct roles and will ultimately need to work together to sustainably serve existing and future development in Los Osos. So as outlined on the slide here, it's our understanding that the BMC's role primarily is to implement the basin plan as required by the stipulated judgment. Then we have the water purveyors, and their roles we understand is to provide a sustainable water supply to their customers. And then county planning's role is to develop and administer land use policy. And what this really means from the county standpoint, and the county's role is developing a plan that balances needs for future growth, including job creation and provision of housing, with the protection of coastal resources, including, of course, water supply. So parallel planning efforts. So the basin plan identifies programs for basin sustainability. We understand that phase 1 programs are intended to stabilize the basin and halt seawater intrusion, and that the phase 2 programs have the potential to increase sustainable yield to accommodate the population build out allowed by the Estero area plan. On the county side, Los Osos community plan, or the 20-year land use planning framework for the community, sets policies for community build out, considering the sustainable capacity of all community resources, including, again, water supply. And then in addition, in terms of safety margin, the basin plan and community plan both include safety margins to protect the sensitive groundwater resource. The basin plan aims to keep groundwater demand below 80% of the estimated sustainable basin yield to reserve a 20% buffer for uncertainty. And the basin plan also requires ongoing monitoring and annual reporting to track the status of the basin and program effectiveness and adapt as needed. And then the county side of the equation regarding safety margin, the county maintains a growth limit for Los Osos that is reviewed on an annual basis and updated as needed based on available community resources. And in addition, as another safety margin, the county also requires any applicant for new development to offset their increased water use at a 2-to-1 ratio to mitigate water supply impacts through reduced demand. These safety margins allow both the BMC and the county to practice adaptive management. The county is updating the water offset program to evaluate its effectiveness to mitigate water supply impacts for new growth, and acknowledges that the BMC is in the process of updating its basin metrics as well. Finally, on this point, I'd like to emphasize that the community plan is a conservative planning document in terms of water supply, because it reduces the allowed build-out population by 33% from approximately 27,000 to 18,000 people. Again, that's compared to the existing Estero area plan. The plan also requires a 0% growth rate for Los Osos to be expanded from the prohibition zone to the entire urban area. This we'll discuss more in a moment. And the water offset is only intended to be interim mitigation until phase 2 basin plan programs are implemented to sufficiently increase sustainable basin yield. So as I mentioned, this approach that we have employed in the Los Osos community plan that's currently pending Coastal Commission certification is really an adaptive management approach. The county policies reference data from the BMC and individual purveyors. So first, the county requires applicants to provide a will serve letter from their water purveyor before any construction permit issuance within purveyor boundaries. As mentioned on the previous slide, the community plan requires a 0% growth rate for the entire urban area until basin plan programs are complete. And then in terms of the annual reports, the annual BMC report informs the annual growth rate for allowed residential growth and the need to maintain a water offset requirement as interim mitigation. And again, this is the plan that was approved by the Board of Supervisors last year and is currently pending Coastal Commission final approval and certification. Now, drilling down a little bit more on this concept of safety margins, the first on the county side of things is the residential growth rate. So the current growth rate in Los Osos is 0% for the prohibition zone or the sewer service area, and that's based on regional board prohibition of new septic systems due to nitrate contamination. And the rest of Los Osos is currently subject to the 2.3% countywide growth rate. And then also it's important to point out that the sewer LCP or coastal development permit special condition 6 also prohibits sewer service to undeveloped parcels until Coastal Commission approves the community plan. So the 0% growth rates consistent with that. And then moving down to the next row here, new pending Coastal Commission approval. So this is the growth management ordinance amendments that were tentatively approved by the board pending approval of the community plan by the Coastal Commission. And under this plan, the new growth rate would expand the 0% growth rate to the entire urban area until phase 1 basin plan programs are complete to stabilize the basin. And again, this is an extra precaution, although the current water offset requirement is still in place. Then when phase 1 programs are complete, the new growth rate, or the growth rate would be 1.3% per year for 5 years, which would allow about 80 new single family and multifamily units per year. This growth rate will allow the existing wait list for the prohibition zone to be able to build and allow community build out by 2040, which is the planning horizon for the community plan. And the 1.3% growth rate would still need to be reviewed annually and amended if needed, although the water offset requirement would mitigate water supply impacts if necessitated by basin plan program status and basin metrics. And then finally, looking ahead at the kind of future phase, so the future growth rate would be determined based on the best available data, such as the BMC annual reports. And this is consistent with our current approach of an annual review of growth rates based on best available data and making necessary adjustments. So again, I want to emphasize that the county is required to review the growth rate annually based on best available data. In addition, per state law, affordable housing and accessory dwelling units cannot be subject to a growth management ordinance. So they are exempt from the county's growth management ordinance. In addition, the board adopted community plan and growth management ordinance would also exempt second-story commercial conversions and pipeline projects, and that is again pending Coastal Commission approval. And a little bit of information about accessory dwelling units. So in an effort to increase housing stock, recent changes to state ADU law require ADUs to be allowed in zones where single-family dwellings or multifamily dwellings are allowed and prohibit imposing minimum parcel size requirements. We've estimated or projected potential ADU development in Los Osos by looking at the historic trend of ADU development countywide. In the year 2020, countywide, 88 ADUs were permitted. And then we multiplied that by a factor of 2 to account for the state ADU law, really encouraging and promoting the development of ADUs, which results in 176 ADUs, and then 13.5% of those ADUs were estimating to be developed in Los Osos based on the Los Osos share of the countywide population in 2040. And that's how we arrived at the estimated 24 new ADUs per year in Los Osos. This slide describes the current water offset program, which is the second safety margin on the county's approach to land use in Los Osos. The 2-to-1 water offsets are required for new development to offset water supply impacts until the phase 2 basin plan programs are sufficiently increased sustainable yield. In addition, the Planning and Building Department is initiating a water offset study that will verify the water usage assumptions for different types of development, such as accessory dwelling units versus single-family dwellings versus multifamily dwellings, estimate water savings potential, and develop a monitoring framework to ensure the effectiveness of the offsets. And wrapping up here, I know that was a lot of information, and there are multiple documents in process and pending Coastal Commission approval. So just a timeline, kind of looking, well, first, this is last year. So January of last year is when the board adopted the ADU ordinance, and then adoption of the ADU ordinance was actually finalized in June of last year when the board adopted amendments to the Coastal Table O for the ADU ordinance. Then in December, the county board adopted the Los Osos community plan and the new growth rate pending Coastal Commission approval. Now looking at 2021, this month, we will initiate the water offset study that I mentioned. We've been in discussions with the water purveyors regarding the ADU ordinance, and we expect to receive their formal comment letters in July. And then we plan to submit the ADU ordinance to Coastal Commission with a response to the comment letter that they submitted, so that can move forward to Coastal Commission for a hearing. We estimate the water offset study will be complete this in September or October of this year, and then plan to submit response to Coastal for the Los Osos community plan at the end of the year. And that concludes the presentation. And we have a team available to help answer questions. Again, Kylie Hensley is our expert on water supply issues in Los Osos. We have Corey Hahn, who's the department's ADU expert, and also Mladen Bandoff from Public Works to help with any questions as well.
Thank you for that, Erilyn. I wonder if I might just add a little bit, particularly on the ADUs. As part of working with Coastal on the ADUs, we certainly understand that interactions with the water purveyors are going to be among the key. That's an issue that quite obviously comes up. And we're trying to deal with some competing state interests, if you will. On the one hand, we have the state encouraging ADUs in a way that removes a certain amount of local control. And we're finding the local jurisdictions are required permit them under certain circumstances. At the same time, especially working in the coastal zone, we're absolutely understanding of the need to protect coastal resources and to protect a water supply that is highly constrained, shall we say, in Los Osos. And so it's for that reason myself and the county reached out to the purveyors, not only in Los Osos, but in other communities like Cambria, to find out how you all feel about serving new development, ADUs in particular. But as we get down the line, this I think is going to be a good introduction to the issue of serving future development in general, as we talk about the approval of the local coastal program and imagining the future of Los Osos. And I should say that from the county's perspective, in terms of ADUs, we are certainly respectful of the sovereignty of a water purveyor to decide whether they're going to provide service to any new development. That comes in the form of a will serve letter. And so what we've been doing in extensive discussions that we look forward to continuing through the summer is to make sure that we're on the same page with each water purveyor that's going to be affected by this ordinance. The water purveyors, I think, are realizing that there are maybe circumstances where their discretion has been preempted by state requirements. But in every instance where a water purveyor has discretion about serving a new development like an ADU, the county is perfectly happy to accept the water purveyor's decision on that. So I want to make sure that that's clear. The water purveyors have the role and the responsibility of developing water resources to serve their existing customers and such future customers as they can envision the resource to handle. So in terms of our land use regulation, planning by its nature, of course, is an envisioning of the future of Los Osos, but the actual regulation in the procedural steps really does involve getting a commitment from a water purveyor in the form of a will serve letter that proposed development can connect to a municipal water supply. That's a fundamental condition of our land use ordinance. So with that, we'd certainly be happy to open this to questions from the committee, and we'll look forward to public comment.
Okay, thank you. So before we go to public comment, does any commissioners, anybody on the committee, not a commissioner, a committee member, have any questions? You'll have another opportunity after public comment too, so. Okay, I guess nobody has any comments then. Laura, can we go to public comment, please?
Sure. If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. All right, Jeff, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I appreciate the presentation by county planning staff. I have a handful of questions, clarifications, and maybe a comment or two. The first question is when the zero growth rate is expanded throughout the urban area, what limitations on commercial development will accompany that that zero growth rate for residential? And then I guess I'm still unclear on the purpose of the zero growth rate. Right now, I think we have maybe 2 or 3 on average new homes, maybe a little bit more recently, but single digit, certainly. So is zeroing the growth rate out really going to stop a lot? And then there's the question of, well, if the basin plan programs are completed under phase 1 before the community plan is finally approved by the county and the Coastal Commission, then I'm not sure what that purpose would be with that scenario. So back to phase one, I did want to clarify that to complete phase one means to complete construction of the LOCSD upper aquifer program A well and the LOCSD lower aquifer program C number 2 well. So again, does that complete phase one? And then real quickly on Title 19, I really don't see that as an interim mitigation strategy. If there's the amount of water I think there is out there to conserve, we could be doing that for years. And then the question is phase two. I'm a little unclear. Phase two, as considered by the county, is that basin plan programs B and D? That's a question. And if B and D are part of phase two, I think that's going to be a very uphill battle, and I wouldn't tie my wagon to that at all. Finally, regarding the ADUs, we've had a grand total of 0 approved in Los Osos. The expectation for 24 a year, I think, is a bit of a stretch. And really, that whole ADU ordinance, in my opinion, the coastal staff is going to want to fold that into the larger community plan. So I think the focus really should be on getting the Title 19 update completed and then refocusing on both the ADUs and the community plan. Thank you very much. Hopefully my questions can get answered. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
at the end of everybody's comments, Jeff will address questions. So thank you. Okay.
All right, Lindy, you just have to unmute yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I have a number of oddball questions here. One, this 2-to-1 water offset, you've already accepted and noted the data that was provided to you that it's way off and it should be closer to, I don't remember, 6 or 7 to 1 for the Title 19. And I'm not sure why that's taking so long. Maybe you could answer that question. The county, as far as the purveyors providing will serve letters, how do we see what the county is doing as far as allowing new wells and new hookups to neighboring wells, et cetera? That we don't have a clear knowledge of how that works. And I don't think that's up to us watchdogs to have to go out and see what each project is taking out of the basin. And then maybe Supervisor Gibson can answer, a couple of meetings ago at the supervisors, the state, I've forgotten what it's called, state mandated growth ordinance set Los Osos aside till 2030. In other words, we don't have to meet the state requirements. So I think that should be acknowledged clearly, that there is no mandate to force us to build beyond our sustainable basin yield. When some of these basin projects are done in phase one or whatever, I prefer that the reading of the completion, meaning that that's a success, be replaced with the data, proven data, and it should have like a 5-year period to prove that the new wells and the new infrastructure created more water for the new growth. It shouldn't be that they got completed, therefore, boom, we're ready to go. So I find that doesn't sound right at all. You know, when you talk about mandating, say you put an ADU in and you've offset supposedly, well, the only way that we would ever know is to look at the water records to see what the use is. And I think that that's what we are arguing here, is that the water use will be much higher than estimated and could be much higher than estimated when you have people that don't care about water use and they have the money to pay their bills. It does not guarantee that they are using what we expected them to use. And 24 new ADUs per year in Los Osos is ridiculously too many. I know we need housing, but we also have other ways of letting people remodel their houses a little bit.
All right,
So,
Lindy, you've hit your 3 minutes.
good, thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
There is a public comment that came in through the question and answers from Vic B. It says, how much of the rising nitrate level in Los Osos water supply be due to agricultural and local fauna like horse stables? How is this measured or monitored?
Okay, thank you, Laura. So let's move
No
on to
problem.
Patrick.
Patrick, you're able to speak. You just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I would like to first comment on the state mandate, and I think Lindy had touched upon this, that we need affordable housing and ADUs, and that's something the county is and should acknowledge and support. But in the coastal zone, the Coastal Act of 1976, which is to protect coastal resources, takes mandate over that other state as far as state mandate as far as acquiring affordable housing. So that doesn't really apply to the Los Osos area. Also, as far as the zero growth rate goes, which is real confusing because in 2010, our population, according to the census, was a little over 14,000 people. And now our population is over 16,000 people. And I'm not really sure where that population increased from if we have a zero growth rate happening. Also, as far as ADUs go, I know of several ADUs that are being built right now on 4th Street. So there are ADUs that have been approved. There are also ADUs that the Coastal Commission has taken jurisdiction over, that they will probably continue taking jurisdiction over any other ADUs that come along. And I'd also like to ask here that I understand that the county is hiring a consultant. I don't believe that has happened yet, but if it has, who is the consultant? And when will the new metrics be adopted? And if they have not been out there, if the new metrics are not available, what are the metrics currently being used to approve new housing in an assumed 2-to-1 offset, such as the new 10 mobile homes that have just been approved in Morro Shores State Park or National Mobile Home Park? So those are my comments, and I'd like to get answers for those at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, Babak, you just have to unmute yourself and you can speak.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Babak Nafisi. I am an attorney, local land use attorney, and I represent Los Osos Sustainability Group. With all due respect to Mr. Singwell and Supervisor Gibson, the presentation about the county's jurisdiction and land use authority and its interaction with the BMC and its authority, it's sort of, the county, I think, is seeking to create its own parallel reality where inconvenient facts are just left out. I'm going to give a few examples of some of the more important ones, but the county has consistently really said and behaved as if merely implementing particular aspects of the basin plan is going to be enough for the county to allow future growth. But the basin plan is based on a model whose predictions need to be borne out by evidence in the real world. And so far, that evidence is lacking. And that's why the Coastal Commission has repeatedly agreed with LOSG in our argument that the county can't really approve any more development in Los Osos that requires that creates additional water demand. That's because a host of important regulation, including conditions of the coastal development permit for the wastewater treatment facility and the county's own LCP, have provisions that require the county not to approve new development until the water basin is stabilized. The point of, and then the retrofit program was intended initially through the coastal development permit to reduce to conserve water by reducing demand so that the basin can recover. But if the county has been consistently approving new projects based on a retrofit plan, which as the county appears to be admit that it's not monitored and its efficacy has not been proved, but it was never really intended to allow new straws into the basin. It was supposed to reduce the overall demand, which is not going to happen if it's used as mitigation. The county just approved, the planning commission just approved 10 new units in Morro Shore, approved West Coast, Wild Coast Farm cannabis operation. These are all new demands that have not been adequately addressed.
You reached your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, there's no
Laura.
further public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee. Daniel, would you like to try to answer some of those questions before we start, and then, or Erilyn or Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, I think it may be more appropriate for county planning staff to try to address a number of the questions. I think many of them got to the sort of details and intent of the growth indicators within the community plan. So maybe if we let them take a first crack, and I'll see if there's any other questions more directed towards the BMC that I can address.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's turn it. Erilyn, would you like to respond to the questions about the county planning?
Yeah, so this is Erilyn Singwald with County Planning. And so I'll address a couple of the questions that I heard. And then also, I don't know if Kylie Hensley has been promoted to a participant, but if she could be promoted, maybe she can jump in and help answer some of the questions as well. So there was a question about whether or not the 0% growth rate would apply to commercial development. So the growth management ordinance applies to residential development. It applies to new dwellings with exemptions for certain types like ADUs and affordable housing. And so commercial would not be subject to the 0% growth limit. It would, of course, still be subject to the 2-to-1 offset requirement, and also to special condition 6 on the coastal development permit for the sewer, which disallows connections or vacant lots to connect until the community plan is updated. There was also a question about the 2-to-1 offset requirement, whether it should be a higher offset requirement, such as 6-to-1 or 7-to-1. I'm not familiar with where that figure comes from, but really the goal is to achieve at a minimum a 1-to-1 offset requirement, and 2-to-1 provides that additional safety margin, as I discussed in my presentation, to ensure that at a minimum a 1-to-1 offset is being achieved. And I think if Kylie's on, I'll let Kylie jump in and answer a few of the questions as well.
Thank you, Erilyn. This is Kylie Hensley, County Planning staff. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Kylie.
So just want to reiterate, as Erilyn mentioned, that there are planning area standards in the community plan that prohibit commercial development, non-residential development, as well as the residential growth rate until the phase 1 programs are complete. And actually, the language in the standard, in that community plan standard, and in the amendments to the growth management ordinance, it actually reads until the Board of Supervisors adopts a resolution certifying successful completion and implementation of the following programs as amended or adjusted through adaptive management described in annual monitoring reports. So there is a bit of flexibility in evaluating when that completion milestone is reached, whether that needs to incorporate an additional verification period. Regarding Jeff Edwards' questions, why expand the 0% growth rate? So that's intended to be a duplicative safety measure. The phase 1 programs are intended to stabilize the basin, and while the water offset requirement is in place, it's just an extra level precaution, acknowledging that those programs are still in progress. And yes, it refers to the program A and C wells that are still pending coming online. And if those phase 1 programs were complete before Coastal approved the community plan, and if the board adopted a resolution acknowledging that those phase 1 programs had been complete, then that 0% would kind of be a moot point, and it would go straight to the 1.3% residential growth rate. As far as Title 19 being an interim mitigation strategy, and the feasibility of phase 2 programs, as discussed extensively during these meetings, the BMC has a working group that's working on evaluating funding mechanisms to move some of those projects forward. So it is being discussed, and we're trying to parallel those efforts as best we can. And as far as the process for bringing these items back to Coastal Commission, as Erin outlined in our timeline, we do see the ADU ordinance and the community plan as two distinct efforts and very different scopes. One is responding to a state mandate. There's a sense of urgency about wanting to maintain that local control. And the community plan is more extensive, long-range planning documents. Regarding Lindy Owen's comments regarding the timing for the water offset updates, so we are preparing an informal request for proposal for consultants and vetting that with Public Works, and wanting to make sure that that consultant will be able to address all of the concerns raised about the offset program. And although the RENA requirements don't identify specific lots in Los Osos, we still have vacant properties that are waiting to build. And I will let Mladen from Public Works speak to the question about the nitrates, if you are available, Mladen. And regarding Patrick McGivney's comments, the Coastal Act and the state ADU law don't cancel each other out. The state ADU law still does apply in the coastal zone, and we're in discussions with Coastal Commission about how best to balance those two state mandates. And we have not yet hired a consultant for the water offset study. And as Erin mentioned in the presentation, we expect the new metrics to be recommended in the study in September, October, and any changes that require an ordinance amendment would need to go to the board for approval. Thank you. And in the interim, we're continuing to use the existing metrics to evaluate any projects that move forward before the update is complete.
Okay, Kylie, thank you. Mladen, do you want to step in now?
Actually, I would defer to Dan if he caught that question, if it was specific to the BMC.
Yeah, I can attempt to answer the question. The question was, how much is the rising nitrate level in Los Osos water supply due to agriculture or local fauna like horse stables? How is this monitored and measured? I'm not aware of a comprehensive study completed recently with respect to the origin of potential rising nitrates. I do know, as was mentioned at the previous BMC meeting, that S&T has initiated a study looking at the potential sources of increased nitrates in the lower aquifer in their portion of the basin. And then with respect to how are nitrates measured and monitored, the BMC has a nitrate metric, which it tracks and monitors to evaluate the long-term trend in nitrate concentrations within the basin. And then I don't have all the specifics, but I do believe that the county also monitors nitrates as part of its permit for the wharf facility.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just sort of follow up that what Mrs. Bruce, what Dan said just now is correct. We do have an extensive monitoring program of nitrates that was part of the sewer project. But I wanted to speak just a little bit on the Title 19 2-to-1 offset ordinance, because that's a great example of roles and responsibilities. Mr. Nafisi asserted that the intent of that offset 2-to-1 offset ordinance was to let the basin recover, and that's not exactly correct. The 2-to-1 offset was put in 2009 to deal with growth outside the prohibition zone. So the regional board, as we all know, established the prohibition zone, no new connections, no new septic discharge. That was in long standing, but we had properties outside that weren't covered by that. And the question is, what would be the right way to manage their, any future growth in that area? And so understanding at that time that the basin had significant issues with seawater intrusion, it was the board supervisor's decision that any new growth that we would permit out there, which was not covered by a growth prohibition specifically, would be sure not to further negatively impact the water situation in the Los Osos Basin. And so that was as a matter of mitigating the extra growth, which we know has only been 1 or 2 residential units a year. But as Erlen indicated in his presentation, the choice of the 2-to-1 was to ensure that we got at least 1-to-1. And so the actual recovery of the basin is the purpose of the BMC and the basin management plan. And so I just wanted to sort of draw that distinction, which I think is really illustrative of the way the county works with the water purveyors. It is the responsibility of the water purveyors to secure a sustainable water supply for their existing customers, and what growth they envision can be sustained by the resource. The county, in permitting growth where it could, was working very hard to make sure that we didn't make the situation worse. And I think in general that approach has been successful. Now, the Coastal Commission has asked a lot of questions about that offset ordinance. They quite reasonably want to be sure that it's working. So that is the reason that the county's commissioned the study to verify that the numbers, the parameters we use for various kinds of water saving devices actually produce what they say they will. And this, of course, has to operate in an average general sense. We can't look at day-to-day, month-to-month water uses and identify that a particular fixture switch has produced a certain water savings, because it depends on a whole bunch more than that. But on average, we have ample evidence from the engineering studies that set these things up that this on average will conserve water and again not make the situation worse. So I think that's a great example that again supports the point I was trying to make, that in terms of envisioning the future of Los Osos, the basin plan indicates that there's a resource there that, if properly developed, could serve the growth that's envisioned in the community plan that the county put forward. That's an absolute condition of our planning for the future of Los Osos. The timing and the means and the exact how that resource gets developed is in the hands of the water purveyors. And so that's why the county is certainly very interested in aligning our planning and land use regulation efforts with the adaptive management that the BMC manages in terms of the water supply. And within the BMC, I see the county's role as supporting the water purveyors as they work on the issues that they're responsible for. And one of the things that I think is going to be a very exciting development, I hope, within the next 12 months or so, is that our folks in the flood control district, basically our public works folks, have indicated that we have sufficient funding to pay for a transient model. And I think that's going to provide the kind of technical resource that's going to be key to really doing good adaptive management. So I know those discussions are underway at the staff level. We are able to come up with about $150,000. I am given to understand. I do believe that got passed through in our budget hearings over the last day plus. And with a matching grant from the state, we're looking at the ability to go ahead and get that transient model in place and working to achieve the goals that the Basin Management Plan has set out. So that's that's the view from the county. I'd certainly be happy to entertain any questions or comments from my colleagues on the committee.
No, Bruce, I'd like to finish with the questions from the public before we go to questions from the committee. So
I think they got them all. Oh, let me add to one. There was some question about the state growth rate, and I was looking back on the meeting of the 8th of June. We did take action, not on the actual growth rate for Los Osos, but we have extended the lifespan of the deferred allocations. Basically, we extended the validity of the wait list for building allocations in Los Osos until 2030. The growth within the urban reserve line or within the sewer service area remains at 0% until such time as the LCP is updated and or the ADU ordinance is certified by Coastal. That's the only one that I didn't see answered.
Well, the question was raised about the county monitoring nitrates, and Daniel started to answer that. And then the question is, where is that monitoring being measured or done?
Well, I think that's a technical question that Public Works can get. That's in the permitting. There's a monitoring plan that's part of the requirements of the permitting of the sewer plant. I imagine that it's in a lot of the same wells that the BMC uses to monitor nitrates, but I think that one we could certainly bring back the details of where that's monitored at the next BMC meeting. It would just require Public Works to dig that out.
We have Mladen on the thing here. Could you?
Chair Alinsky, this is Mladen Banov. I'm with the Water Resource Division, so I'm not 100% knowledgeable about where that is. We'd have to pull in our Utilities Division to answer that question. Either John Austin or Mark Chiamani from our Utilities Division.
Okay, if you could do that for future. So Milan, did you have anything additional to add to what Erilyn and Bruce said?
Oh, no, that was perfect.
Okay. All right. I just did have, before we go to the other committee members' comments, I just had one thing that I wanted to confirm. It was raised by one of the persons who talked that the presentation was wrong because there were AUDUs being constructed in Los Osos and particularly on 4th Street. I live on 4th Street, and the two places that I'm aware of that are have construction right now, one is just expanding the bathroom, and the second one's right across from my house, and where they just built a she shed where the lady's putting in a quilting machine. So I just wanted to ask Erilyn, were there any ADU permits issued? Because when the 4th Street example was thrown out there, I think that that's incorrect. So I just wanted to confirm with Erilyn that there are no ADU permits issued as a correct statement.
Yeah, so this is Erilyn Singwald. Yes, that is a correct statement. We we have approved ADUs in Los Osos, which were subsequently appealed to the Coastal Commission and are pending
Correct.
Coastal Commission appeal hearing, but none have been permitted.
Yeah, that, because I know the ones that were appealed, a few of those were withdrawn after the Coastal Commission took jurisdiction over them, so.
Correct.
Okay, all right, so we'll go to comments and questions from the commissioners or the committee members now. So, Mark, we want to start with you?
This is Kylie Hensley, County Planning Staff. Can I just clarify something for the record?
Yes, go ahead.
So there was actually one building permit for an ADU that was approved before Coastal Commission took jurisdiction, took appeal jurisdiction.
Okay,
And that's the only one.
okay, all
And
right.
it was approved by the county under state law and
Okay.
noticed the Coastal Commission.
Okay, so there's been one, so, okay. All right, so we'll bring it back to committee members. Mark, would you like to talk first?
Yeah, I am, gosh, I am really still struggling with how to respond to all this. There's a lot that was brought
Yes.
in this presentation. One of the, just staying on the very high level of this, I guess one of the questions I would initially have is just even this presentation coming before the BMC without any, I don't know how it got onto the agenda. Maybe things like this in the future, we agendize them so we're prepared for them and we can dive into it and better have better responses. But basically, unfortunately, I disagree with a lot of the content of the presentation and some of the discussions that we had. And I default over to the overarching ISJ and basin plan of collaboration to improve the groundwater basin conditions for existing users is really the founding of the ISJ. And we agreed to collaborate together and that the county would be a partner in that. Not, I'm not sure how what their role is today, but I think there was some mechanism as a support that they're more of a participating partner is how I envisioned it. And so that to me is disturbing. It also, understanding what our roles and responsibilities are, we kind of have a divide there that I think maybe we should have clarified from the beginning before this presentation, because that's another area where I kind of am on the polar opposite of what it was presented and discussed. I think that there is significant, the agency that has the land use authority has the responsibility to ensure that the resources are available for the policies, the land use policies that they're implementing. And so that's where I don't think that we're connected in that point, at that point with Los Osos groundwater basin. The fact is that, we're the basin plan was really the way it was presented in this presentation is it was project based, but really it was a modeling, and it was going to be confirmed by verifying the metrics that were established in the plan, not by checking boxes of completing projects. And so that part is still, a part I'm struggling with too, as far as county planning, not understanding that aspect of the basin plan. And then, using the plan as a tool for their planning efforts it's another area that I think, we have to dive deeper into. But overall, just one of the things I want to be clear on in the roles and responsibilities, especially the can and will serve letter aspect, that if we talk, supervisor gave a couple scenarios of the different agencies and their roles, and one of the things is Golden State is a regulated utility, and we can't use the can and will serve letter process to supersede the land use authority of the county. If we use the Cannon-Wilson process, we would supersede the county's authority for the decisions that they're making. So I disagree with that. It's substantiated all throughout California, how that's laid out. And I really think that maybe, Supervisor Gibson and I need to have a further conversation on that part of it, just so, these kind of things aren't misleading to the public during these meetings. Yeah, I do, just overarching, I was surprised that this presentation came out now. And I mentioned it when I first started, is how did this get on the agenda? The purveyors in the middle of preparing a letter to the Coastal Commission in response to much of this content. I think it would have been it would have been better received if we would have had that letter to the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission could have responded to the letter, then we come back to the basin management and have a discussion like this. I think we could have cleared a lot of this up, but overall, I think that this presentation was more, it wasn't productive. I think it muddied the waters between the roles and responsibilities, and I thought the timing of it, I think, Dan, I'd like to better understand how things get put on the agenda before they do. And I think I'll just stop right there.
Yeah. No, Mark, I totally agree with everything you said. Daniel, you might want to try to explain how this got on the agenda without anybody's previous knowledge. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but.
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yeah, no, there was a request to include an agenda on this presentation on the agenda. I granted the request. In hindsight, it would have been better to run that request through the BMC staff group to provide the BMC parties more opportunity to better understand what was the content that would be presented, and time to work collaboratively amongst the parties on the timing and of the presentation. And so that's something that I take responsibility for, and will work to ensure that future agenda items of this significance, we have a chance to vet them at a staff level prior to bringing them to the BMC.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, let me offer a couple of comments here. I certainly understand that today's presentation had a lot of information in it, and we haven't at the BMC really talked explicitly about roles and responsibilities, but the many things that we have coming up, in terms of resolving these issues that are already moving forward, really depend on that clarity. And so you could, you didn't mean to put anybody on the spot here, but I think this is an important opening in a conversation that will carry on. I do think, though, that a couple of important concepts here need to be agreed upon eventually, and that is that it is indeed the water purveyors who are responsible for verifying that there is a sustainable amount of supply of water to supply some number of customers. And it is certainly not the responsibility of the county to tell you how to do your jobs. That I think I've been quite consistently respectful of that. And so when you look at our land use, all our land use regulation is based on the premise of a sustainable water supply, of an adequate water supply to serve the development that we're putting forward. And we're willing to put some insurance in there with things like 2-to-1 water offsets and the like. But by the nature of our land use authority stopping at land use, we have to be respectful of the decision of a water purveyor to supply or not supply a particular project. And, you know, this is a conversation that's not done. We're in conversation with the Coastal Commission, not only in Los Osos, but also in places like Cambria, where they are asking us to sort of peer into your business and make findings on our own over your sovereign matters. And so what I wanted to assure my colleagues on the committee was that we are respectful of your decision as to whether to serve or not serve a particular development. And that really came up in the first instance in the matter of ADUs. It'll come up again, obviously, in the community plan. And to Mark, I appreciate the challenge that CPUC regulation puts on you. And, you know, maybe our conversation might really explore what we can do to give you more control over how you make decisions of what new development to serve. I've heard you mention this before, that you have constraints as to whether and when you can withhold service to a particular customer. But you know, I want everybody to understand that we are respectful of that decision. I don't see any water purveyor's decision to choose to or not to do a connection as impinging on the county's land use authority. In fact, water supply is but one of quite a number of different resources that we have to verify are not negatively impacted when we do authorize new development. So yes, it's complicated. Maybe yes, a little bit of preliminary work to ease into this might be helpful. But I certainly commit to continuing this conversation at future meetings and or in personal meetings to make sure we come to some agreement and can get on the same page, because I think that's good for the community of Los Osos.
Hey. All right, Bruce.
Marshall, if I could just kind of comment back on that. So I appreciate that, Supervisor Gibson, and definitely do want to work and support with the county on the growth initiatives and the undeveloped parcels in Los Osos are tax-paying citizens that have a right to develop their property too. And so that's where we stay neutral on that aspect of it. But the fact is that, what being part of the BMC and working in this basin for many years, just as you have, we understand the basin and what those resources are. And so, a 2-to-1 offset, it still wouldn't be even palatable to me to have a 5-to-1 offset. I just, right now we're trying to halt seawater intrusion, have implemented numerous projects to do that. And we need to look at our metrics to ensure that that's happening. And then, how do we develop these projects? You have Golden State's full support to implement projects. And, one of the key factors is a funding mechanism. So, one of those overarching conditions from Golden State is funding new development, existing users having to fund new development projects. And so I think we could get online. One of the things that I think new development, we need to bring in another source of water into Los Osos, the basin. If we're going to implement these projects or implement a level of development today, we need to have a source of water that supports that. And right now our work is cut out for us supporting the existing users from the Los Osos basin. But I think we can get there with collaborative. I mean, that's our goal. That's why we're part of this basin management committee, is to get there. So yeah, you have our support in your efforts too of land use.
Yeah, no, we'll certainly look forward to continuing the conversation, Mark. I guess the one thing I would say is that the basin management plan does show that to our, to the best science we have right now, that there is water available. There is a resource available to support the growth that's envisioned without importing new water, which of course would be a very significant, expensive, and controversial step if that resource is developed and utilized properly. And I think there are a lot of opportunities coming in the future with enhancements to water recycling that we can do it. But again, know that I'm absolutely committed to supporting the purveyors as they develop that resource. And I think that the this discussion, while it's got a lot of moving parts and may bring up some challenging issues, is really what we need to do. So know that I'm in it for the long haul, and happy to meet with you and anyone else on the committee as needed to help move these things forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. Just I'm sorry, Marshall, I don't mean to, but just the projects that we implement are modeled. We have to. You mentioned about having a resource available. Well, that resource is on paper based on a model, and so that, I guess, is an area that as a purveyor I'm struggling with, is the fact that we're looking at metrics. We're going to look at it in our next agenda item that tells us that story hasn't been completed, or that modeling. We may be moving in the right direction, implementing these projects, but we haven't confirmed what we've done has actually created this additional resource, as you mentioned. So yeah, I think we keep working together. We make it complete these projects the best of our ability as soon as possible, and we can get there.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So Charlie, do you have any comments? I mean, I appreciate, Mark, what you said at the beginning, is this was overwhelming, and it was not the intent, I think, of Daniel and Erilyn when they agendized this to, overwhelm us and have us, have to do this. But I think it just raises future discussion items. So Charlie, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I agree with what Mark Zimmer says. I'm probably going to restate that. I hope I'm not going to take very long. This presentation by the county seems to have a rather singular message that the county has sole responsibility for and authority for land use. The water purveyors and 3/4 of the BMC have the responsibility for creating sustainable resources in their service areas, and they need to stay in their lane. Now that's my interpretation. I've heard that before, though, that very phrase. The implication is, and I hope this isn't true, that the BMC recommendations concerning land use and things like water conservation offset credits aren't really welcome. And I think in the past, the Basin Management Committee, the 3 water purveyors on the Basin Management Committee, have been very timid about providing advice and opinions regarding land use as it affects water production and water use of water resources in the basin. So if this presentation from the county has had similar, that the other purveyor representatives have similar interpretations of this, maybe it's a good thing, because I hope that the Basin Management Committee graduates from its timid position on providing advice. And I hope that we do, like Mark Zimmer says, I hope that we can have a collaborative relationship between the County Land Use Authority positions and the water purveyors position regarding the use of basin resources. And I found one place that Mark Zimmer is referring to in the stipulated judgment, section 2.4, page 7, that says that the state of California has ceded primary responsibility for the management of groundwater resources in the Los Osos Basin to the Basin Management Committee, who accept that responsibility through implementation of the Basin Plan and this stipulated judgment. So that's just one place in the stipulated judgment, but there are several more that discuss the responsibilities of the Basin Management Committee for actually managing the water resources in the basin, not just measuring them. Thank you. That's it.
If I could just respond, Mr. Chairman. The nature of this presentation, Charlie, is not at all to suggest that water purveyor comments are unwelcome. We certainly want to hear your feelings on the matter of how water resources affect land use decisions. What I'm hoping for out of this in subsequent discussions, as it's clear this is going to require some follow-on to figure out, is just to make clear that the county is in no way going to dictate to the water purveyors how much water they need to pump, or how and what way they need to develop their resource. We stand by absolutely per the section of the ISJ that you quoted there, to support your efforts in doing that. And that's, again, I think the great example of that is providing funding so we can get an enhanced modeling capability going, which will improve the management of this resource. So absolutely, it's not. I would hope that the impression was not that the water purveyors stay in their lane, but rather that the converse message actually is that the county certainly respects the authority of each water purveyor to provide service to how many customers they deem appropriate, and we are happy to use the information and we have in terms of the basin management plan to inform our views of how to plan for the future of Los Osos, because that's what we have to do in a wider sense than just water. That future of Los Osos depends on its water supply. We all agree on that. And so I hope out of this, we just, might think about some ways in which we can make our efforts, our joint efforts here more effective. I think that's really, I hope, the takeaway from today's presentation.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I think that the issue that the other three parties are all raising is the roles and responsibilities question. I think that there needs to be future discussions about that, because you have, stated that what you just stated previously, but I think that because the three water purveyors do have concerns about that, I think there needs to be subsequent future discussions about that. So I don't think we need to talk about that anymore, because it's like something that's been talked about. But I think that's the takeaway that I get is roles and responsibilities. Discussions need to be continued in the future here.
I agree.
I have one more comment, and I'm sorry, we have bigger fish to fry than this, but this isn't the only time I heard on the nitrate discussion. The basin nitrate metric was described by a few parties during this discussion as being a very comprehensive measurement of nitrate concentrations in the water basin, and it is not. The current basin nitrate metric only measures a few wells of sampling first water in the upper aquifer. It is not a comprehensive measurement or reporting of nitrate concentrations in the basin. And in fact, I'd like to propose we should rename that basin nitrate metric to the first water basin, the first water nitrate metric. There's certainly room for improvement there.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Okay, I think that we have given received and had good comments from the committee members and the public, and I think we have specific direction of how we need to work together and to make sure we're all on the same page with the roles and responsibilities of various parties. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, Laura, please, which is the consent agenda. I don't know if anybody wants to pull any of the items on the consent agenda. There's 3 items on the consent agenda: the approval of the minutes from the May 19th, 2021 meeting, the approval of the amended minutes from the March 25th, 2021 meeting, and the 2021 budget update and invoice register. Does anybody want to pull an item? Okay, seeing none, does anybody have any questions before we go to public comment on these items?
Is it specifically questions or and not comments?
Well, no, questions before public comment, comments usually after public comment.
Okay, no.
Okay, so can we go to public comment, Laura, please?
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, *9, and if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the committee for discussion and a motion. Charlie, I think you had a comment or a question or something.
Yeah, I guess we do have bigger fish to fry, but I'm a little unhappy about the accuracy and the detail in the transcriptions for the meeting minutes. There's some specific things that were left out. And I'm not gonna, I think I'll take them up with the staff and leave it at that, but I'm ready to make a motion if no one else has comments.
Okay. All right, would you like to make a motion then to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Approve the consent agenda, yes. Okay, do we have a second? Please?
I'll second it. This is Mark.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, Laura? Since with Zooms, it's hard to make sure I get everybody's vote.
I can do the roll call.
Oh,
Chair
thank you.
O'Hilsey.
Thank you,
Yep.
Dan.
Director Cody,
Approve.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chair O'Hilsey.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda for public comment on items not appearing on the agenda. I'd just like to clarify that this is for items not on the agenda, so items that we've already discussed relative to that presentation or that may be coming up in the 2 items on the action items or the executive director's report are not part of these comments. So if anybody has comments for other items, now is your opportunity. Please raise your hand.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. All right, Jeff, just unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hilsky, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I wanted to talk about the Indeed job posting for the new county groundwater czar. And I'm going to read from the posting so you get it exactly. This is the job description. The County of San Luis Obispo is recruiting for a groundwater agency director. This is a newly created management position which will report directly to the county administrative officer with significant interaction with the county board of supervisors. The incumbent's primary focus will be the leading and implementing solutions for long-term groundwater resources management. The GSA director will represent the county in 2 adjudicated basins, Santa Maria Valley Groundwater Basin and the Los Osos Valley Groundwater Basin. The GSA director will ensure effective legislative and regulatory compliance, facilitate and collaborate with inside and outside stakeholders to ensure stakeholder interests and concerns are being addressed, and provide overall strategic direction to ensure the county's groundwater strategy is effective and successful. The individual selected will oversee the selection, management, and success of a group of groundwater sustainability consultants. Who is this masked man or woman? I posed the question to Supervisor Gibson and his administrative aide or ledge aide, but I haven't received an answer. And my initial reaction is, we don't need another cook in this kitchen. We got plenty. So really, what does this mean for the Los Osos groundwater basin? As importantly, what does it mean for your committee? Because it sounds like this is a brand new job with overlapping responsibilities, certainly well paid, over $150,000 a year for a qualified individual. I'd love to hear from the supervisor what's going on. Thank you.
All right, Lindy, you just have to unmute yourself.
Hi again, Lindy from Los Osos here, but I wanted to address what the county has said is no new growth is really happening inside the prohibition zone, except that's totally incorrect. What is happening is, possibly because there's so much new staff, the county is issuing many new permits for remodels. The ADUs were included in some of that, but it's all ministerial. I'm on the LOCAC Land Use Committee, and we were used to seeing a number of projects come forward where we could put our input in. Most of those projects now are being managed by the county only, and so there is no oversight on them. In fact, it's very difficult to even find what new permits have been issued. There's been discussion about what new development will have to pay, and they need to pay for everything extra that we need in order to guarantee that there is extra water. I want to go back to the whole idea of where we're going to get this extra water. We're going to get it from the back end of the basin. It's not extra water. It's just slow moving water that will stop the saltwater intrusion possibly. But your best bet would have been to, and this was on the county with the sewer, that the county was going to do a large ag exchange. That would have meant agriculture was not pulling out of the basin. Instead, it's all being taken up to Broderson and put in on some kind of an experimental, may not see the results for 10 years, may not work. But meanwhile, the ag people have not been able to use that water or been invited or included much. And so we've totally lost the option of providing more water by having them not use the basin water. The Title 19 that's been used has been incorrect, and the county admits it, for 12 years. So all this time that supposedly we've got no new water draw because we're doing 2-to-1 is not correct. It's totally failed us. So I wish the county would acknowledge that they were wrong in that generous agreement to that. From what Jeff said, I don't think that our basin management committee needs any more oversight. That's what we're there for, and that's what they do, and they do a good job. So I don't want to be included in the new czar, oversight. I basically say we need no new growth in Los Osos until we are sure that we have a sustainable basin. These formulas and these, great plans do not guarantee that it's working. It's currently
Lindy, you've hit your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Patrick, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'd like to just actually agree with Jeff Edwards and also Lindy Owen when they brought up the issue about the water czar. In Los Osos, that position has already been taken, and that is called the Basin Management Committee. We don't need anybody else overseeing our basin. We already have, by the stipulated judgment and court order, the Basin Management Committee taking care of that position. Also, population. We have never addressed why we have a population more of 2,000 over the last 10 years if we have a zero growth going on. And as far as Lindy's comment on the offsets, they do not work. 2-to-1, even given a 1-to-1 offset doesn't work with the present metrics being used. You would need actually more like a 10-to-1 offset for a 1-to-1 or a 20-to-1 offset for a 2-to-1. And that's all I have on this one. Thank you so much.
All right, Babak, you can speak now. You just got to unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Babak Nefisi for LOSG again. The issue I want to bring up was touched on by the county's presentation, but I really have a different angle, and I'd prepared to talk about this. So this isn't really in response to that. So the stipulated judgment makes it clear, section 5.3, that the purpose of the BMC is to implement the stipulated judgment and the basin plan. And the basin plan includes section 8.6.1, water efficiency goals. And it establishes that it is the goal of the basin plan that Los Osos achieve the highest standard for water use efficiency. Improving urban water use efficiency is the highest priority program for the basin plan for balance in the basin and preventing further seawater intrusion in the groundwater supply. And then there's a whole list of measures to improve water efficiency. And these include such measures as toilets in the wastewater service should be replaced variously by 2016 and in the planning area by 2035. High efficiency shower heads need to be installed. There's a residential retail rebate program that is also listed in the basin plan. There's a very useful chart on page 178 called Urban Water Efficiency Measures. And conveniently, the coastal plan, the coastal development permit required the county to set aside $5 million specifically to achieve water use efficiencies, and the use of retrofits and implementation of gray water systems was specifically mentioned in that. So given that the county has been using the retrofit program as mitigation for new development, and given that the county is now looking at that program and reevaluating it, and given that this aspect of the basin plan has not been really promoted or addressed very much, I would like to have the BMC consider this issue and at a very least ask the county not to approve any more projects on the basis of this kind of mitigation until a plan can be developed more specifically to implement section 8.61 of the basin plan.
You've reached your 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's no other public comment at this time.
Okay, fine, great, thank you. All right, we'll take all those comments into account, and then we'll move on to item number 7 right now, which is the executive director's report. Daniel?
Thank you, Marshall. Item 7, executive director's report. I'll keep this brief. And really much of the efforts of the BMC staff have been focused on preparing the annual report, which is our next item, but I will cover a couple of items. Under funding and financing, I had recently reached out to the State Water Resource Control Board to check on the status of their water recycling funding program. Happy to confirm from them that that program is still active and well funded. And so it continues to be an opportunity for the BMC to pursue funding to further evaluate water recycling related initiatives if the BMC should choose to do so. Moving down to the wastewater project flow and connection update. I was able to get some updated information on the recycled water flows. Unfortunately, it was after the agenda was published, but I can report that the recycled water flows for April remained consistent in their proportions, with similar amounts of recycled water going to Bay Ridge, Sea Pines. There was water to ag of 0.2 acre feet, but then the majority of the water going to the Broderson leach field with 33.6 acre feet. And we'll provide updated numbers in future executive director reports. And those represent the updates. The latest updates with respect to basin infrastructure projects is included in the annual report. And I think we had a lengthy discussion on the county planning land use issues in an earlier item. And that concludes my executive director's report.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Any questions before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll go to public comment. Laura, please.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, so we'll just receive and file that report as a committee, and then we'll move on to the action item. Excuse me. We'll move on to the action items. Oh, sorry. Need to get a drink of water here. So Daniel, would you like to move forward with that item 8A, which is the final draft of the 2020 annual report?
Yes, thank you, Marshall. Item 8A, presentation of the final draft 2020 annual report. If the committee will recall, in March, we presented some early findings from the annual report monitoring. In May, we presented the draft 2020 annual report and received comments. And we're here in June to present the final draft annual report for the Los Osos Basin ISJ for the BMC's consideration for approval and submission to the court. Just for reference, the report is due to be submitted to the court by June 30th of this year. So, and if we move, I did prepare one slide. If we move to the next slide. So there were a number of comments received on the draft annual report, and those comments, along with a response to the comments, is included at the end of the agenda packet for the public and the board's review. I'd like to acknowledge the significant efforts of Spencer Harris and his team for diligently reviewing and responding and addressing or noting the comments that were received on the draft annual report and making minor and other modifications to the final draft report that you have in front of you today. I just wanted to highlight a couple of those modifications here. One, there was an updated reference point elevation for LA 43 that was incorrectly shown in table 5. And that, I think, led to some confusion and some questions about different water levels within the basin. That reference point elevation has been corrected in table 5, And but then also it has been acknowledged that the water level elevations contained in the rest of the report that relied upon that reference point were correct in the public draft. It was just incorrectly shown in table 5. An additional modification included added description of the well survey that was completed in 2020 and findings from that. There was an additional description of water use trends within the Los Osos Basin going back to 2013 to current. And then additional reference was made to the BMC's upcoming review of the sustainable yield estimates. There were a number of questions, comments about the sustainable yield numbers included in the annual report. And so there were modifications to the report to reference both the history of those sustainable yield estimates, the original estimates, the changes that were made in previous annual reports, and the intention of the Basin Management Committee to go through a more formal evaluation of those sustainable yield estimates in the second half of 2021. Other modifications included the addition of 2 recommendations to Chapter 9. Those include a recommendation for an additional monitoring well to be better able to monitor and track conditions in Zone D and E, and also the addition of a recommendation for the development of a model update and an incorporated peer review of the model. And then finally, it translated into a minor modification in the report, but there is a lengthy response to the comments with respect to the ag demand calculations, and that is included in the response to comments at the end of the report. And so that concludes the presentation that I have for the committee today on the final draft annual report. I do have materials, figures from the report that we can review if necessary, but at this point would turn it over to the directors for questions.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So do we have any questions before we go to public comment or comments?
Yes, I have some questions. And
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Go ahead. There's a little work going on in my place here, so it may be a little noisy in the background. I apologize.
okay, put your hammer down during the meeting, please.
I wish. It's not me, it's a plumber, and he's pounding.
Okay, I have some questions about some things that have been brought to all of our attentions here recently. I'm going to couch these as questions. Is it true that the Basin Management Committee has been making changes to the sustainable yield figure without going through the proper process as mandated by the stipulated judgment in section 4.3, page 15 of that document? Question. And then second, isn't it true that the proper procedure for changing this important sustainable yield figure, that this requires a full vote of the board, unanimous vote to approve these changes 1 year in advance of the report that they'll be used in? That is referencing the stipulated judgment, section 4.3, page 15. And I'll just leave that for those questions.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I don't know if Erica or Jenna want to answer their questions or can at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a stab at a response to that. It's my understanding of the history that the sustainable yield calculations were modified at some point during the process of preparing the 2017 annual report, if I recall. And I wasn't around at that time, so I don't know the exact process that was utilized for that. However, I do believe that that annual report that incorporated the updated sustainable yield estimates was approved by the BMC with a unanimous vote, as well as any subsequent annual reports that included those updated sustainable yield calculations were further approved unanimously by the BMC, is my understanding. Whether that warrants an exact following of the requirements of the ISJ for sustainable yield, I can't make that determination.
Well, that's why I wanted one of the legal counsels to weigh in on the legal requirements that we're trying there. So I don't know, any of you want to weigh in on that, or should we just go with Daniel's answer at this point? Erica?
Well, and I'd like to add something, Marshall. I think one of the challenges that we have, specifically when addressing these very technical legal questions, is that the BMC currently does not have its own legal representation. The legal representatives for the several of the parties are actively involved in the BMC staff dialogue and have been a great resource to the BMC as the BMC has navigated through the last 5 years of basin plan and program implementation. But it can be, and depending on the nature of the question, difficult for legal counsel representing one of the BMC parties to sort of weigh in on a legal issue that may impact the larger BMC as a whole. And so I just bring that up as something for consideration by the Basin Management Committee moving forward.
Yeah, that wasn't, my question was just with conformity, whether that either of them had any comments about that. I'm talking about process, not about substantive matters.
Understood. Okay.
So there you go, Jenna. Thank you. I'm glad that you weighed in.
Yeah, well, I will, I think I'm going to, in many ways, echo what Dan said, that, there is language in the stipulated judgment which sets out a broad process. And we have, considered the sustainable yield, and it has been, I guess the word is confirmed in adoption of annual reports of the past. I do think it would make sense moving forward to have a better understood process for consideration and reevaluation of the sustainable yield, which I think Dan is planning to bring forward to the BMC in the near future. And I think also that at that point, we can then really evaluate the sustainable yield and the process for amending the sustainable yield. So that's my response right now.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate that. Okay, do we have any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay, Laura, let's go to public comment. Bring it back then.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. All right, Patrick, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to mention that after all the conservation that the community has done, according to the extraction rates, there has been no water savings over the last 10 years. We keep going up and up in our extraction rates. And to answer Dan's question dealing possibly with the stipulated judgment, and I have this prepared, so I'd just like to go through this. In 2017, the Basin Management Committee apparently approved the annual monitoring report without discussing or voting on a very important but hidden sentence dealing with the sustainable yield being presently used at 2,760 acre feet a year. Some of you have asked, where did this number come from? Some don't remember approving it. The sentence in question can be found on page 59 of the 253 page 2017 AMR. It reads, and I quote, "The sustainable yield of the basin with the infrastructure in place at year's end 2016 was estimated using the basin model to be 2,760 acre feet per year," end of quote. This is a significant material change to the basin from the 2,450 acre feet a year that had been voted on and approved in 2016. The correct established methodology to use in making these changes can be found in the court-ordered and approved stipulated judgment, where in section 5.11.4, it says, and I quote, "The Basin Management Committee may act only with unanimous approval of the directors in authorizing or implementing any material change to the basin plan," end of quote. This change was a material change and needed to be specifically voted upon. In the 2020 annual report, the 2,760 acre feet a year is still being used. If you approve this AMR, you are ostensibly approving this metric, but are in default of the stipulated judgment. To approve such a change, the stipulated judgment says you need the best existing available data and existing evidence. The best available data and existing evidence in 2020 does not support a 2,760 acre feet a year metric. The basin is in overdraft and has been for over 40 years. Seawater intrusion is the result. Chloride and water level metrics do not support an increase in the sustainable yield from the original agreed upon 2,400 acre feet a year. In closing, we ask you not to approve the final 2020 AMR as written. We ask you to return the sustainable yield.
Thank
to the
you. Thank you,
2,400
Patrick. Thank
Patrick,
you.
yeah, you reserved 3 minutes, sorry. All right, Jeff, just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. My name is Jeff Edwards, and a couple quick comments on the mods. First of all, it appears that if the county is going to fund the transient model, do we really need a model update and peer review of the steady state model? It would seem to be moot at that point. The second thing under mods, there's this ongoing debate about what agriculture uses in our valley. And it's my view that we ought to consider for future AMRs that we just designate 800 acre feet for ag. Let's set it aside. Let's use it in our calculations, the basin yield metric. And let's just, instead of wagging back and forth between 600 and 800, let's just set it at 800. It's what came out of the ISJ. The other thing, I think we need to get back to the creek discharge. You know, I'm a big supporter of Broderson, but we keep dumping water at Broderson and we still don't know if it's going to work. What we're trying to do at Broderson is get the water into the lower aquifer, zones D and E. Well, what we know about the creek is that the lower basin actually daylights at the creek bottom. So we don't have to guess. We know if we put water there during the summertime when the creek's dry, the water's going into the lower basin. We know that now. It won't be an experiment. And so, you know, the whole creek discharge was shuffled to the bottom of the deck as an initiative through this prioritization that you guys did. It was baloney then, and it's still baloney. I ask you to get it back as a high priority. That is the creek discharge. Make that a high priority. Additionally, and this is all for the next annual monitoring report, I think we ought to really look at state water. Yes, it has political implications, but what the county's doing right now in consultation with the CCWA in Santa Barbara and the State Department of Water Resources is crafting a water management tools amendment to state water contracts. And this is going to provide enormous flexibility and address, in large part, the high cost of state water for folks that haven't subscribed yet. So the focus really is on what's the cost to get the pipe from the end of the Chorro Valley pipeline and get a spur to Los Osos, and consider it emergency for emergency purposes. But I think it would be money well spent. And now is the exact time to get your oar in the water. That is the CSD in Golden State, because the meetings are being held right now. And the County Public Works Department is well versed on that. Thank you.
All right, Babak, you can speak now. Just unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Babak Nafisi again for LOSG. At the risk of beating a dead horse, I did want to spend my time also talking about the sustainable yield issue. What LOSG suggested in its comments was that the AMR just very clearly explained that the 2760 figure wasn't arrived at properly, and that we don't really have, that can't be justified and go back to the original 2400. The comment as to why this is not done was that the number was arrived using the established methodology. But as Patrick explained, the basin, the stipulated judgment specifies that any change to the sustainable yield number must be made on the best available data and evidence. Now, the AMR itself admits that at the time the 2760 number was arrived at, it was based on the fact that the construction of the 8th Street well had commenced. So the 8th Street shallow well, which was constructed in 2016, but has not yet been placed in service. In fact, the table ES3 of the AMR explains that it was drilled and cased in December of 2016, but the budget, the $320,000 budget to equip the well, was just retained, and that the design is complete, but project has not really started to move forward. So there was no evidence at the time to justify the 2760 number. And I think what the AMR should say, to be forthright and transparent, is that that number was not justified, that it wasn't arrived at based on the methodology required by the stipulated judgment, and that this assumption or this contention that the basin plan objective of basin yield metric of 80 or less, we just can't say that that has been met, because the 2760 number is simply not reliable. Thank you.
There's no other public comment at this time.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Okay, thank you. I'll bring it back to the committee then.
Mr. Chairman, it's Bruce. I guess the only question I really have, and then I have a couple comments at a point, is whether our technical experts support the current estimate of the basin yield metric. There's been a lot of back and forth on it. Everything I've read is that they have responded to the questions raised. It will remain a subject to be evaluated as we go forward. And I think the addition, the upgrade to a transient model will help us coordinate understanding the basin yield with the performance of the metrics once we get those metrics evaluated and revised. So I guess to Dan, I would guess that in terms of technical support of that number, is there any question, any reason that this committee should not approve the report with that number in there?
My answer is that, yeah, that my understanding is that the updated sustainability yield estimate was developed using the previously agreed upon methodology and assumptions that were established as part of the basin plan. And I guess just I would add though that, you know, I think there is a lot of value in being able to walk through what that methodology and what are those assumptions that go into the sustainable yield estimate, and that we are going to do that as the BMC in the second half of this year. And I think that'll be an opportunity to develop a more comprehensive understanding amongst the BMC and the public on how that number is calculated, and if there need to be modifications to that number moving forward. One of the things that I think we're reluctant to do, or we're trying to move away from, is making substantive or you know, sort of changes as part of the annual report development. The development of the annual report is on a tight regulatory deadline. It has a deadline to submit to the court. We don't always have the time to do the due diligence and evaluate all of the different components that go into a complex calculation and methodology set for example, estimating sustainable yield. And so my goal would be to do those types of efforts outside of the annual report preparation, and then look to document those efforts in the future annual reports once the BMC and the public has had the opportunity to do their due diligence.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I concur with that approach, and would just add, Dan, if you could then make sure you're consulting with our appropriate legal advisors to make sure that the process is all taken care of appropriately.
Yeah, so I mean, we had you know, at our last meeting, we had direction and comments that were provided to Dan to make the modifications to the final draft report, which he has presented to us today. And I think long-term issues we can deal with those, and the approach that Dan just talked about and Bruce just agreed to. But I think because of the timing of this and the fact that he did incorporate the comments and questions that we prepared, I think that we should go ahead and approve this. So I don't know if anybody else has any other comments, or if we can have a motion here.
Yes, I have a comment. Charlie has a comment here. I think it's pretty clear that the process, the mandated process in the stipulated judgment, has not been followed. If you look back at the 2015 annual report, the very first one, there had only been one meeting. And we all went to these meetings, all four of us were all present at these meetings in the early days. There was one meeting in December of 2015, and then the presentation of the draft annual report occurred in the spring, late spring of 2015. The figure for sustainable yield used in that 2015 annual report was 2,450 acre feet, which was still a deviation from the ISJ mandated 2,400 acre feet. Now, I'm not saying, I don't want to imply that the deviations from mandated processes was a deliberate thing, or that was done with intended malice. I don't think that happened. I think it was a mistake, but I think that I'd like to revisit all of those, like Dan's suggesting. And S&T, unfortunately, is going to lodge a protest vote for no, not to accept this draft report because of the process issues.
Charlie, this is Mark. If I could just add to your comment about voting no at this time. What if we added and gave direction to Dan to review this and we noted in this annual report that we are going to review it and confirm the numbers. It helps us meet our compliance deadline. I mean, I'd rather be late and be right, but the fact is we did bring it before us. You know, I don't know if our questions just weren't answered appropriately or if we have additional questions now, but would that change your vote if we added something into this annual report where we made the disclaimer that we were going to evaluate this number and come back with you know, based on the evidence that we find, any modifications to this sustainable yield? You know, one of the things, the reasons why I say that is that we didn't change it this year. It's been changed in previous years and we've already approved it. So I don't know why holding back this one right now would really make a difference. I think we've acknowledged the fact that this is out there. Let's work to correct it and not do it under a time constraint, because that'll always be before us, is that we have a time constraint to file the annual report. So what do you think about that kind of amendment where we would add a disclaimer in there that we're going to look at this and direct Dan to further evaluate it a little bit closer?
Mark, thank you, and I understand you're being diplomatic, and I wish I felt the same way, but I think that this is such an important violation of procedure. And again, I don't think it was done with malice. It's an accidental oversight. I would prefer to have the Basin Management Committee write a letter to the court explaining why we're going to be late with the submittal, and say that this is actually an important problem that we're going to set right, and please excuse us. And I think that the only negative recourse, if you think of it as negative, is the court could, the state of California could move us to become an SGMA basin because we weren't following procedures. And I welcome anybody's comment about how horrible that might be.
Personally, I think that we need to approve this report and then address the sustainable yield estimates.
Mr. Chairman, does this need to be a unanimous vote?
No, I do not believe it does. I think it's just a majority vote. But
Can we
I'd
get
have to ask Jenna or Erica to weigh in on that.
Could we confirm that with one of our legal advisors, please?
That's what I just said, yeah. So Erica, can you let her?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. So unless specifically enumerated otherwise, which the enumerations are in section 5.11.4, only a majority is required and approval of the annual report is not identified in the list.
Well, okay. Yeah, Bruce.
Mr. Chairman, I would say I certainly respect Charlie's concerns regarding process. I think this committee has heard from our technical experts over the years, and have for some years accepted that number that we're using. So in terms of the technical review, I don't have a problem based on advice that I've been given. I do understand the importance of going through good process, and so you know, I would certainly respect S&T's decision to vote no on this, but I think the consequences, especially, I don't see that our lateness on this is gonna trigger Sigma taking over the basin. We're in adjudication, and this will move forward. But I think S&T's no vote brings up the important question of being careful with this. We'll thank them for that vote, and we'll go ahead and approve this when you're ready for a motion.
Oh, we're ready for a motion, Bruce, I believe.
I move we approve I move we approve the report as presented.
Can I revise that motion or add to it that we add that contingency for further review of the sustainable yield?
Absolutely.
figure?
Direct staff and reinforce the idea for further review. Absolutely.
Okay, so any further discussion?
Can I add one thing real quick? This is Erica, sorry. Can we just get confirmation in the motion, because setting the sustainable yield itself does require unanimity approval of the annual report, does not. So for purposes of the motion, that what's going on is simply approval of the annual report, and consistent with the committee's discussion, the sustainable yield is not being revised or set as part of the approval of the annual report, but that will be done through a process later this year.
Yeah.
But it is contingent on the review of the accuracy of the annual report. I mean, we can add that part in it. We're not changing it at this point, but we are making it contingent on a thorough review of the sustainable yield process and results.
I guess, Mark, I guess I'm not quite sure what being contingent. So first of all, certainly I'd stipulate to what Erica has suggested, but we're approving this report as presented, and my intent would be to direct staff to engage the analysis of that safe yield and bring an item to this committee so that we can formally endorse a sustainable yield per the process laid out in the ISJ.
Right, I agree with Bruce on this one.
So no going back, there's not a concern that this wasn't properly done all the way from the beginning in 2015?
Not enough to hold up, approval of this report, Charlie. I understand that some of these things probably should have been done with a different process, but I think the technical underpinnings of the numbers that we're seeing here have been appropriately reviewed by multiple technical experts, and I'm comfortable with them given the knowledge that we have at this point. We're committing ourselves in this motion. My intent is to commit ourselves to another review on the technical side and an assurance of strict adherence to the process that's laid out in the ISJ.
Would we consider an edit to an adopted report up near the front with an admission that the BMC has accidentally not followed the correct process?
I'm not going to agree to that, no.
Okay.
And so on that basis, I won't either. I don't think I don't think that what departures from process, I don't think are material at this point, Charlie. And I think by next year, which is close, soon to be upon us, we'll have this squared away. Both we'll have the technical aspects confirmed, and we'll have the any wrinkles in the process squared away. So I think your concerns for doing this by the letter of it are appropriate, but I don't see anything in what's presented to us as materially wrong or misleading or otherwise improper.
Right, and I mean, the other thing we could do is if we move forward on this item, we could file an amended final report with the court, but I think we need to do a timely filing here.
Yep.
Marshall, how would we do an amended file? Would that take place before the 2022 annual or 2021
Yes,
annual report?
we could potentially do it prior to the next year's annual report.
If there's something so substantive as to make it worth our while to do that.
Because just to add a comment, I don't want to make decisions based on the that are when we're using information coming from the sustainable yield. I would not want to do that based on inaccurate information. So if we do direct staff, I would want that done timely, and somehow I'm trying to get it so we're locked into having to do it, not that it'll just be a recommendation to do it. Is there a way to do that, that we can,
If I might, Mr. Chairman, let me respond to that. I mean, I understand where Mark's coming from. You know, if we, I don't think we necessarily need to go back and file the annual. This is the annual monitoring report.
Right.
If in the course of between now and when we file the next report, we come up with a different number for the sustainable yield, and that's agreed to according to appropriate process, we can go ahead and base all the decisions that this committee makes on that amended thing. We can
Correct.
then note in the upcoming report that we did this. I don't think this annual report doesn't constrain us in any way that I understand to decisions we make going forward as to how to manage the basin.
No, it's just a monitoring report, as you pointed out, Bruce, yes.
Again, I'm trying to give you comfort that we're on solid ground here.
I know it's the monitoring report that doesn't, that's just a filing in our report, but it's that number that comes from there and potentially referencing back to the monitoring report. I think that even if we review these claims and the process and the confirm the number, we still need to make an amendment and add that into the monitoring report that we looked at this, we reviewed it in detail and confirmed it is accurate, is just as important as confirming and identifying some errors or inconsistencies.
Why don't we agree to write a letter to the court based on whatever happens if we have something to say before the next report's due? I mean, it doesn't preclude us from giving the court more information between these annual monitoring reports. Let's keep it simple, so we're not burdening staff with too much effort for for the benefit of a small business.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you
Hello?
there?
Nope.
Marshall?
I'm sorry, I lost you for a minute there. I apologize.
Yeah, we're back.
Okay, what happened? I'm sorry, I missed you.
What I suggested to Mark was that if there's anything that comes out of this review that's upcoming on the sustainable yield, we can certainly inform the court with a short letter that would advise them. They can add that to the file.
Right.
And that shows us, I don't think we need to go through a big formal resubmission of an amended full report.
Well, no, that's another approach, yes.
Bruce, wouldn't it be that this monitoring report is more of a tool for us to use in making groundwater management decisions? The court really just wants to ensure that we're doing what we said we would do, and that's to file a monitoring report. So I don't think they have too much concern over that, but I think you understand my concern is just, that we base decisions based on this monitoring report and the content in it. And so I want to make sure that we don't lose that. And I mean, just based on our discussion today, we got a lot of decisions that we're going to be faced with in the short amount of time. And I don't want that monitoring, that's a tool that we would use to reflect back either to support or identify additional work we need to do. So I think it's got to be right. And we got to do that. So if we did look at this, I would want it to come back before the BMC by our next meeting to confirm that. I don't think it's a lot of work. I think we heard some specific items that need some detailed, peer review or expert review of, and to come back and bring that before us, because what I heard, I don't know at this point.
Yeah. How about this, Mark? Let's just agree among ourselves that we won't take any major management actions until we've got this resolved. I'm perfectly fine with that. I would give staff what time they need to conduct the review that they need. And in the meantime, I'm certainly happy to agree that we don't make management decisions until we've confirmed this very important number.
Dan, can you make sure that we at least get that documented correctly in our minutes so that we're memorializing our understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could include that in the direction to staff.
Yeah.
Yep. Once we've finalized the motion.
Yeah. So it's the motion again, and I think we might be ready for a vote, is to approve the annual monitoring report with the stipulations that Ms. Stuckey gave us as to what exactly we are approving. Direction to staff to conduct a review of the safe yield number, and direction to staff and an agreement among parties that we will not make any major management decisions until we have confirmed the safe yield number, which is to come back to us as soon as possible.
Okay, Mark.
Hold on that.
Mark, are you there?
I'm here, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
I believe I second the motion that Supervisor Gibson made.
Okay, so can we take a vote then, Laura, please? Or pardon me, Dan?
Yes. Director Cody,
No.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chair O'Hilsky.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 3-1.
Okay. So can we move on to the next item here, please? I've got to step away for the meeting for just a minute, so I'll be right back. So Dan, take it over.
Yeah, I can take over. We seem to have lost the screen share. Not critical. Next item 8B.
Dan, you had mentioned that you wanted to share your screen for this one.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that, Laura. Hold on. Bear with me while I get that prepared. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Item 8B, update on potential geophysics opportunities for the Los Osos Basin. Just wanted to provide an update to the BMC on some potential opportunities that have been discussed at a staff level with respect to geophysics and the Los Osos Basin. Just initially a little overview. Geophysics is a non-invasive investigation that allows for geologists, hydrogeologists, geophysicists to obtain information on subsurface conditions. There are a number of different technologies, but the technology that at least I'm familiar with and has been discussed is the use of electromagnetic fields that are developed and conducted down into the ground, and then measuring the response of those fields to the properties or in the aquifer or the water within the aquifer, provides information on the properties within the different portions of the basin. And I believe the BMC has received a presentation on some geophysics opportunities in the past, and we'll be revisiting some of those. There are potentially two different types of geophysics surveys available. There's land-based or terrestrial or aerial surveys, and I'll get into those in a little bit. The reason I'm bringing this to the BMC is that the geophysics potentially provides the opportunity to collect information about what is occurring underground in areas where we don't have data. Either we don't have monitoring wells in close proximity to these areas, or actually, these are areas of the groundwater basin that underlie the bay or the ocean. Other areas where it's just physically impossible or very, very challenging to construct a monitoring well. And geophysics is a proven emerging technology. It's been used worldwide and then also has been used here locally with projects having been performed in Santa Cruz, Monterey, Pismo Beach, and Paso Robles. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this technology to the BMC for additional consideration is, as I mentioned, it can provide information on aquifer properties, which is always informative when in evaluating a groundwater basin, and it improves your understanding of the different types of materials within the basin, the location, by materials, I mean clays, clay layers, gravels, sands, and other geologic features. But it also can be useful in identifying the location of seawater within a groundwater basin. And so you can use this technology to identify the location of a seawater front in an underlying aquifer in a much more comprehensive way than you can by pulling discrete water quality measurements from a dispersed set of monitoring wells. And what I'm showing here is just an output from a geophysics survey. And the way these are completed, you complete them along paths and you create these two-dimensional cross sections, but you can cover a large area depending on the individual project constraints. And so you can get potentially a more comprehensive picture of the location of a seawater intrusion front in a basin than you may be able to get with just traditional water quality monitoring via monitoring wells alone. And so the first opportunity is what we're calling a land-based geophysics. It's an electrical resistivity survey. There's the potential to partner with Cal Poly. There's a professor at Cal Poly that specializes in this type of research. And that's the opportunity that was presented to the BMC a couple of years ago. This would be a very low-cost opportunity and potentially could be utilized to obtain the information I described previously. Some of the challenges of the land-based survey is you're potentially constrained on your survey area because of your ability you have to be on land for one, and there are another potential sort of property owner or environmental constraints that would potentially limit where these types of surveys could be completed. Some of the concepts that have been discussed would be performing a land-based survey here on the Midtown site. This would be probably the highest priority location for a geophysics survey, as this is really the center point of the seawater intrusion within the basin, and a location where it would be very beneficial to collect geophysics data and to be better able to locate the front of the seawater intrusion in zone D and E. However, there are some other locations that could be beneficial as well. Here's a transect that is proposed near and around the Broderson disposal site. This could provide some, interesting geologic information, as well as maybe some insight into the mounding of that is occurring at Broderson. And then another location could be out here extending off Sea Pines and S&T Mutual Service area. It's kind of viewed that this could be used as potentially a calibration survey, or it is known that there is seawater in the underlying portions of the aquifer at this location. The alternative geophysics potential opportunity is an aerial electromagnetic survey, or AEM survey. This is a survey that is performed using a helicopter, and these are some pictures of a similar surveying being performed. The helicopter suspends this very large piece of apparatus that is used to generate the electromagnetic field and then read the response that the aquifer produces within that field as it travels over a basin. The reason I'm bringing this to the BMC is that the Department of Water Resources has recently initiated an initiative to perform AEM surveys at all the high and medium basins within California under SGMA, and I'll explain more on that later. One of the challenges with an AEM survey, as you might suspect, is it's more expensive. You're flying helicopters, you've got large scale equipment, you're probably not working with Cal Poly students, and so there is a significant additional cost associated with this type of survey, unless you could find the appropriate partnership or grant funding opportunity. However, there are a number of benefits. One, you likely could cover a much larger survey area. This type of survey is much more efficient in being able to cover ground. It can also be performed over surface water bodies. So information could be collected over the bay, and information about what's occurring in the freshwater portions of the aquifer underneath the bay, I think would be informative to our understanding of Los Osos Basin conditions. And another significant benefit of this type of survey is you potentially, you can eliminate the property owner constraints, as you won't actually be physically coming in contact with any property. There are still some potential environmental constraints and some wildlife issues that would need to be evaluated and assessed, and maybe potential times a year when this survey could be more viable than others. But another potential opportunity to improve our understanding of the groundwater basin and the seawater intrusion front. One of the near-term opportunities potentially here is, as I described, DWR is performing a sort of statewide survey of high and medium priority basins as designated by SGMA over the next 3 years. This is being funded by Prop 68 as well as the State General Fund. It's going to be a very coarse survey compared to some of the surveys that I had described that have been performed locally. It's going to be doing the survey in a 2 mile by 8 mile grid. And so for a basin like Los Osos, that wouldn't necessarily cover a significant portion of it. But there will be surveys being performed in our Central Coast region. The Salinas, Paso Robles, and Cuyama basins are scheduled to be surveyed in summer 2021. And the San Luis Basin is also on the list to be surveyed at some point in the next 3 years. One other thing I would add is that the Regional Water Quality Control Board was contacted by the state board for input on this program, and if there were areas that the regional board would consider beneficial for including, and the Los Osos Basin was included in that request. And so I wanted to bring this information really on both of these surveys to the BMC, and just to provide an opportunity for the BMC to gauge interest in this type of activity. There was no budget included in the calendar year 2021 budget for a geophysics survey, and it's not necessarily something that would need to occur this year, but is a potential opportunity out there for the BMC to consider for, again, improving understanding of basin conditions and the freshwater and seawater interface. And that concludes my presentation.
I don't know if our chairman has rejoined us at this point. Maybe the vice chair will have to step in.
So do we have any comments on the presentation or questions for Dan?
Yeah, if I could, Mark, I'm really excited about this. Not only partly because I'm formerly a geophysicist. I think this is very cool, especially the aerial version of this. And while DWR has initially said that Los Osos would not be eligible because it's not technically a Sigma basin, I'm working with Senator Laird's staff, and we are going to get a meeting with the senator and DWR to make a pitch that it would be absolutely appropriate and beneficial to include Los Osos in their program when they come this summer. So.
Yeah, I agree, Supervisor Gibson. And so what did?
I'm back now. I'm back here. I'm sorry. I told you I had plumbing issues, but I got it resolved, so I'm back.
We were just commenting on the presentation, Marshall. So
Yeah, I saw most of it. I just wasn't able to talk.
Yeah. So what does it take to get on this, be involved in the project and get our basin on the list?
Well, it's gonna take some politicking, frankly. It's gonna take it's gonna take all the persuasive powers I have and the senator has and our technical staff have to really show them that, in particular, doing this in the coastal zone, I think would be a great thing for them to do. Seawater is one of the really great uses of this technology because the difference in electrical conductivity from freshwater to seawater is so marked that it's pretty easy to see the changes there. And I'm gonna go to bat for this. The senator, I'm sure, will go to bat for it as well, and we'll just see if we can't talk DWR into doing this for us, and it would be at their expense.
Okay, that'd be great. Support letters from the purveyors or the BMC as a whole or anything like that, would that be helpful?
Absolutely. If you'd like to draft those up, I would have to look at my calendars when our next meeting is, but I'm pretty sure if not this week, it's next, and we're going to be moving on that. So if I could convey to the senator the support of other members of the BMC with letters to follow, I think that would be great.
S&T very much supports this. Thank you very much, Dan, for the thorough report.
Yeah, I think that's something we can do, Bruce. You can tell, Senator Laird, that the Basin Management Committee is all on board with this and that we will provide follow-up letters of support. I think we can all commit to doing that.
Well, when we know exactly the details, we'll get those details out to you so we can do that. And if Mladen is still attending, if we could ask him to just make sure that Public Works factors that into our consideration.
That would be great. Yeah, Mladen still shows up as a panelist. So I think he's still.
Yeah, Chair Aliski, this is Mladen. Yes, yeah, we're definitely keeping track of this, and we'll continue to pursue it and work with Dan on this.
Awesome.
Yeah, sounds good.
So
one question I would have, and yeah, I think that's all a great plan and makes sense. And
oh yeah, I had a question though. Did you guys go to public comment on this? Because that's when I walked away.
No,
we should.
We haven't done that yet.
Let's go to public comment right now if we can. Okay.
Okay.
If you'd like to make a public comment and you're on your phone, please dial *9. And if you're on your computer, please raise your hand. We did receive one through the question and answer panel saying, I really like this aerial electromagnetic survey idea. Knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better discussions we make. All right, Deborah, you just have to unmute yourself and you're able to speak.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask Supervisor Gibson, would it be helpful for LOCAC to also write a letter in support of the surveillance, the aerial surveillance, And then I have a follow-up question that and I'm just new to this committee, so I'm asking, if we were still under Sigma, would we be back to the high priority status and be automatically included in this type of study? Thank you.
So
All right, Lindy,
the
you
short
just have to
answer-
unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just had more of a side effect question about the intensity of electromagnetic testing, and wanted to know if there was any input about if it affects wildlife, or is it something that's done, you know, like once it's set up, it's done and then it's over. So I don't know if that's a good question, but I have always been concerned about excess electromagnetic frequencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
There's no other public comment at this time.
All right, let's bring it back to the committee now. So do you have any answers to that electromagnetic question of Lindy's? Does anybody?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, on that matter, there are no known concerns on that. The one, an AEM survey was flown over Paso Robles, including some highly populated areas. You know, it's a one pass thing. It comes, it goes. There's not a sustained exposure to it. I think the environmental impacts are more about having a helicopter with a huge loop flying where there might be migratory birds or other sensitive species that could be disturbed on it. And as to Ms. Howe's question about LOCAC, it would be wonderful to have LOCAC support. We'll see. Let's see if we need it, and we can certainly keep you in the loop. As I know you have a meeting next week, we'll let you know what we find out when we get there.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much. So do we have any other questions or comments?
I like the question about, asked by Ms. Howe about if we were an SGMA high priority basin, would we get better funding and consideration for projects like this?
Yeah. Apparently, my understanding of that is yes, but I think we should celebrate the fact that we're not a Sigma basin because it simplifies our life quite a bit.
Yeah, it gives us much more control over things for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have, is there any action required on this item, or is it just the informational?
I think based on the conversation earlier, action to direct staff to prepare a letter of support on behalf of the BMC if determined valuable could be made.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Does somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
I'm certainly happy to do so. It's Bruce.
Somebody want a second?
S&T will second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, can we take a vote, please, Dan?
Yeah, Director Cody,
Yes.
Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Zimmer,
Yes.
Chairperson Ohilsky.
Yes,
All right, motion passes 4-0.
unanimously, strongly, yes. Okay, with that, then the next item on our agenda is adjournment. So thank everybody for your attention today. It did take a long time. I think this was setting a record for one of our longest meetings, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, thank everybody for attendance and your input, and we'll see you at the next meeting, which hopefully will be live. Hopefully the next meeting will be in person.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Okay.